Hello my friends, and welcome back to the video, and this is where the most important and the most fun parts comes into play. We'll be using TypeScript's full power here to create decorators and do the main stuff for us. So let's just go ahead and create a new folder inside of src, and let's call it Decorators. Now this is completely up to you. If you want to rename the folder that I'm creating inside, it's going to be a route decorator. If you want to call it something else, or if you don't want to create this folder, it's completely up to you. So let's just create a new file. Wow, I can't create a new file. Let's call it controller.decorator.ts. Now this is my style of like writing the extension itself, but it's completely up to you. If you want to write in just controller.ts, that's more than enough. So let's create a new folder. It's directly inside of source. Remember that it's going to be utils, and this is where that metadata stuff comes in. So let's call it metadata.keys.ts. And let's just define a new enumerator here. This is not possible in JavaScript, remember that. Metadata keys. What did I write? Wow, I can't spell keys today. So let's call it base path, base underscore path, and let's just call it base underscore path. Okay, and let's call it routers, and let's call it router. Let's just like that. Now let's export this as a default. Export default metadata keys. Okay, good. Let's go back to our controller.decorator.ts file, and let's import those metadata keys just like that. It's generally TypeScript helping you out for importing stuff because it already knows stuff like before you even press enter. Let's create a new controller. By the way, this is a decorator, remember. So decorators are nothing but just simple functions. Only with the help of TypeScript they're able to do that way. So let's just create a new base path and call it a string, and we'll be immediately returning it. And this, by the way, the return type of this should be a class decorator. Then we have target, and this is also going to be immediately returned, and let's call it reflect. This is going to be imported from reflect, by the way, and it is automatically available. You don't need to import it. It's going to be defined property, defined metadata, by the way. I think it's not getting, yeah. Just like that, and let's do a metadata keys dot base path, and let's import base path and put in the target as well. Now let's go back and let's see what goes on. So it says that defined metadata does not exist on type of reflect. Now I bet I installed the polyfill. Let's just check. Wait, where did it go? Oh, I almost forgot. So just in case if you even forgot that, I mean, yeah, I forgot, no worries. So let's just go back into our app.ts file. We need to import this reflect metadata itself. I almost forgot that. So back into our app.ts file, make sure that you do it at the very top level. Just simply do an import and do a reflect metadata. Just save that, and that should get rid of the error automatically. Good. Let's do a default controller. Now comes the time of bit of explanation what I've done here. So this is something called a factory decorator. It just takes in a base path. Now this is quite simple. If you see in the function definition, it is automatically getting passed into this, the target property. However, this base path is what we will be passing into it. So what metadata itself is, that it actually allows you, or like allows the decorator functions that we're going to be creating to define a metadata and let it be inherited by the children of that decorator function. So what do I mean by that? For example, if you use controller like this, so if you use controller and the pass into the base path, like for example, you're doing something like that, and then you export a class. Remember, we're using a class-based approach. So, wow. Class, and you again have some class. So this is where this metadata itself will be created. For this class, this metadata will be available all along. That is what this reflect metadata actually does. And by the way, we're defining metadata. We're not accessing it right now. All right. Now let's create another decorator, because we need the most important one is that one. And let's create a new one, and let's call it handlers decorator.ts. This is where all your handler method comes into play. So let's just import. Wow. metadata keys from metadata keys and export an enum of methods, just like that. And this is where we'll be defining all those methods, so feel free to type them out, or if you just want to copy paste them from there. We'll be using get, we'll be using put, put, put. We're going to have post, then we're going to have delete, just like that. We need to create another export here. That's going to be an interface. Let's call it interface iRouter, and let's give it a method of methods and do a middleware. By the way, this is going to be middleware since we're going to be passing in middlewares as well, and not going to be string but any. And then we have the handler path, that's going to be string, and then we have a handler name that's going to be either string or a symbol. Yeah, that does the job. All right, let's create a function and let's call it Decorator factory. And this is where the hardest part comes in, because since we're going to be doing a lot of implicit returns here, let's do a method that is going to be of type methods, and this is going to implicitly return. You can make sure that you wrap them around these so that our IDE, our code editor has a much easier time finding that. And we'll be doing a path. We're going to be passing in string. We're doing middlewares. Make sure that these are optional like that. And let's do a method decorator. You don't need to import it automatically. I mean, it won't even automatically import because this is default available to you. And then finally, we'll be doing a target and property key. And we're going to be doing a function like that. There we have it. So let's open this up and let's configure this out. So right now, bear with me. Just type in what I type and then I'll be explaining everything to you. We'll be, first of all, creating a controller class. And we'll be doing a target.constructor. This is where the original constructor comes into play, and the constructor controller class, remember, is this one. Then we'll be setting up routers, and let's just do a routers. These are going to be of type iRouters and are going to be an array. Let's just do a reflect.has metadata just to check if, for example, the metadata keys that we're searching for are already present. Then we don't need to like recreate them again. So it's going to be metadata key.routers, and it's going to take in the sorry for that, the controller class, and we're going to be checking if this is present. Then we need to do a reflector metadata.get metadata, and that is going to be metadata keys.routers, and that's going to be again controller class. Just in case if it is not present, just make it an empty array. Let's go back to that very different beginning that we have. Now, since most of the time it's going to be a if you're defining a new one, it's going to be indeed a new array, and let's do a push into that array that we have created, the routers array, and we're going to be pushing in the method that we have made, the middlewares, the handler path, and the handler name. Now this is going to be undefined because it's going to be a path that is going to be coming in from right here from the second one. Then we have the handler name, which is going to be of type property key. Good. Once that is done, let's just make sure that we define the metadata again. So let's do a reflect.define metadata. That's going to be a metadata keys.routers, and we'll be creating a routers, and then we'll be creating a controller class. That is it. What's the best part? Because now you can use this metadata factory, what do I mean by that, the factory for decorators, and create all the type of decorators that you need. The first decorator that we have is the, of course, the get one, and let's do a that, and let's do a methods dot, oops, what did I do? I did something wrong, right? Methods dot get, and let's make sure that we remove that import. We don't need that. Now right here, it's the magic of copy paste. Let's just copy paste it 4 times since we have 4 methods. Remember that we have post, we have put, and then we have delete. Remember that, and make sure that you change these as well, because we need post, we need put, and we need delete. Ta-da! Put it on the top. Looks good. Okay, there we have it. Now what is this thing actually doing? So let me explain it to you one by one, piece by piece. So we are creating a decorator factory. Now I will be opening a bit of stuff for you. So right here we have decorators, and as you can see, we actually like implemented these by adding those ones. Let me zoom in so that you can read through this. And this is how we generally type in a decorator, what this target key actually contains. So for example, if I did something like @get, and now whatever is here, so for example, I created a class public or something like this, this thing that is below the decorator is gonna be its target. So that is what this target property actually means, and this is what we're actually referring. Oh, I think I did complete on a different screen. So for example, if I do a .get and then put in something like class, or maybe for example we'll be using generally our what do we call them, methods for classes. So that's what I'm going to be putting in that in, and let's do a get users, for example. So this is going to be the target of this get. This is where this target actually comes for. All right, let's go back. And this is where what I want to tell you, the decorator factory. So that they are immediately returning functions after functions, and that's what decorator factory does. I would still suggest you to go through this to actually give it a good read. However, you don't need too much technical depth on this. The other part that what we're doing here is that we're simply creating a constructor class out of this one, and we're just getting the constructor class here. We're not creating it, remember that. Then we are getting the routers. This simply means that we're creating a router by all the routers that we're passing in. For example, you passed in for users, for post, something like that. It's going to create everything for you out of the box. Okay, you will be getting even more harder idea of this once we start using this. It's going to be really awesome. Let's start over by creating a new folder, call it API. I generally like to do that. It's completely up to you if you don't want to do that. I'll be creating a new folder inside of here, and I'm going to be calling it user. So let's just create a new controller here. So before we even create the controller, let's show you. I'm going to be calling it user.controller.ts, and this is where our class-based approach comes in. Remember, everything right here will be object-oriented, not the functional approach that you're probably used to. So let's create a class, call it user. So I think we'll be exporting this class by default. So it's completely up to you if you want to do like export default user controller. So I think that does it. So we have it export. Oh, by the way, I forgot adding class. So let's just add a controller decorator to this. And so what this controller decorator actually does is that which API endpoints are which route you want to handle. So I'll be handling /API/user. So now if anyone was to hit this route on our API, this is the controller that's going to be managing it. And this is where the topmost abstraction comes in. You don't need to define completely a different folder for one route. It's just this one file handling every single thing for you. And that's the amazing part about this. I will also be suggesting you to create service-based architecture by doing a user.service.ts. And this is where you need to define your service. You could create like a service injector as well if you want to. I won't be doing that for this one. So I'll just do export default class user service. And let's just do like, for example, for this case, I will be using a public async get user. And this is going to be passed in with request. Make sure you always decorate your types. By the way, I mean reference your types. Response from Express as well. It's going to be auto imported, and we're doing a return res.send just for this one, and let's lay get user route. Okay, now let's go back to the controller and let's see how we can handle it. And you'll be surprised to see, because this actually makes everything a lot easier. First of all, before we even start doing it, we'll make sure that we inject our service. Now, this is not a good way of injecting a service, because since we're still making it quite tightly coupled, but this is what we have right now. So I'm going to be doing a this.user service is going to be new user service. That's going to be automatically imported, and that's the user service injected. Now, let's do a public async get users. And it's going to receive in a request that's going to be request from Express, and I think it didn't get imported automatically. Yeah, just like that. It's also going to be receiving a response from Express, and then we're going to be returning this dot user service dot, remember we have a get user implemented, and we'll be doing request and response. So this is like supposed to work. So if I fire in our controller, this is supposed to work. However, this actually won't, because remember, you have not injected this into our original bootstrapper, so your application is not handling it, and we need to create that. So let's go ahead and do the most important part that we have, is setting up the controller itself. So right below setup middlewares, type in private oh, did I write the correct? Setup routes, and let's just do a controllers, and these are going to be of type any. So let's just do a const info. This is going to be of type, oh, oops, array. What's the spelling of array? And this is going to be a generic type. It's going to be an API. That's going to be like the endpoint that you're targeting to. It's going to be a string, that API handler. Then we'll be having the handler itself. That's also going to be string. Then we'll be creating an empty array right here. And let's take on all the controllers that we have and do a dot for each. I will be decreasing that so that you can actually see and follow me along. And remember, this is right here, we receive the controller class, not the controllers. Remember that. We're going to be only passing in the class, and that this controller itself is going to like do everything for us. So we'll be doing const controller instance, because we'll be creating a new instance here. By the way, this is going to be of type oops, let's just do a handle name. That's going to be of type string, and it's going to be of type handler. So let's import handler from Express. Automatically gets imported, and do a new controller. So remember, this is the controller that we're passing an instance of. So if I go back to the app.ts file, just in case you want to know, we'll be passing in the classes here. Remember, we created a user controller class. We'll be passing in this class here. So that is why we're creating a new controller right here. So let's go and make sure that we register our base paths. Let's do a base path. This is going to be of type string again, and we'll be doing a reflect dot get. Remember, right here the metadata should be assigned, because I mean, if you're inside of a router and if you're defining a router, that means the router itself must have been defined in the path itself. So we'll be doing a metadata keys automatically imported for us, base path, and remember we need to get it from the controller, because remember this base path is actually through this controller decorator. Good. Now let's do a const routers. It's going to be of type iRouter. Remember, this is not from Express. We'll need to import it from our iRouter that we have created. So it's going to be an array of it, and let's do a reflect dot get metadata, and it's going to be metadata keys dot routers, and again controller. Good old controller for us. Good. All right, let's start by creating our Express router. Let's do that dot x, let's say xpre express router. It's going to be express dot router, which is like basically you do in your that we have now. What is that? The Express application. So there we have the router, and let's do a routers, because remember, actually it should be routers or routes. Routers. Let's name it routers. So we have the routers so that we don't confuse them with the routers itself. Now let's do a for each. So right here we'll be destructuring. Remember, we have methods. We have method actually. Then we have handler path. We have middlewares. Now if you're completely point blank where all these things are coming from, remember they're from handler decorators. This is where you're pushing everything into it. This is the interface iRouter. So don't forget that. Then we have the handler name. Remember that. So let's create a new function out of it, and if now this is where the more important, because since every route is not supposed to have a middleware, right? So if just in case if it has a middleware, we need to do Express router, which is the topmost router we're using. It's going to have a method, and then open and pass in the handler path. We need to completely like do middlewares. They are going to be arrays, since they're going to be an array, and then we'll do a controller instance. That is the instance that we have created above, we'll be opening a string because we need this string selection here, and then we'll be string selecting the handler name, since that's going to be doing that, and we're going to be binding it to the controller inside. Now, just in case if you're still not clear what this thing is actually doing, it's not some super complicated. See, for example, we have an object that have a property, let's say we have an object, so let's say const test is something like this, and the handler for it, like say, is handler, and this is a function. Okay, so how are you supposed to access this? You'll be doing the test.handler, right? And for example, if you still want to access it using array destructuring, we do test and then we say handler. This is what we're doing there. Okay, so that clears up everything up. Now we need to find this one, and it's right here. We'll do it else, and now it's totally a bit of copy paste here. By the way, copy paste, I mean just take this, whatever you've written above, copy it, paste it down here, and just remove the middleware, since remember we were only checking for middlewares back there. Oh, what did I write here? Where the hell does this array come from? Oh man, I messed something up really bad. Oh, I actually opened an array. That's foolish of me. So just remove that line, save it, and there we have it. Now outside of this else, we need to push everything to the router. So I'll be saying info dot push. This is gonna take in an API, and we're doing a method dot to locate lowercase, which is just simply translated to lowercase, and then access in base path plus the handler path. Ta-da! Close it, or not close it, close in a comma, and then we're doing a handler because we need to provide that as well. Now open up, we'll be doing controller.name. That is generally the thing that exists always on class. Remember, class always have this name property into that. That just puts out the name for the class. And the thing that I showed you down at the bottom, we'll be doing that same stuff here, handler path. Ta-da! Now, I want to show you what this thing actually does. So let's plug this in. We'll be doing a this.app.use, and we'll be putting in the base path and the express router, and that does it. So if you're wondering what the hell did I just do, so let's just go ahead into our app.ts and import the user decorator. Oh, I mean by that I mean not the decorator, but the user controller. So what I have called it, user controller, right? And let's just put in user controller, and that is all you need to do. The controller will automatically handle everything up. However, it won't. So what does this thing actually does? So for example, if I go back into our app.ts file, not the bootstrapper.ts file, and if I try to log this, it should be right here, right? Yeah, by the way, it is not working yet. So make sure that you set up routes. I'll be setting up right here, and just do a setup routes, and let's say we will be passing in controllers here. Save it, and our application should automatically start. Most likely it will crash. So it says cannot read property for each of undefined. Let's just close our application and have a look. So just in case for that error, the only reason that it is saying because we have no routes present. So let's give it some routes so that this thing is actually there. So how you can do that, and this is where the most fun part is, because now you have a get decorator right at the top, and ta-da, it handles everything for you. So you need to enter things here. For example, what this get will handle, it will handle localhost 5000/API/users. Now if you want to extend it, I will just put in test. So it will be now /API/users/test. So let's just get rid of it, save it, go back to Bootstrapper, and let's try running our application one more time and do a yarn start dev. And voila, our application is running. So let's see what this thing actually did. If I come at the real bottom here of this setup route, and if I do a console.table, which is actually something that exists in there, if I do a info, save it, go back, you will see that now we have an API of get API users, and we have the handler controller handling it. However, it says that dot for some completely unknown reason. Let's just go back and see why is it happening. Whoops, this is not supposed to be handler path but handler name right there. So since we're always be handling things from path, not by the name, not path. So there we have it. We have user controller.getUser handling it, /API/users, and you can see get user route that we entered in our user service, and this is what everything is about. So everything is working for you completely fine out of the box. So for example, you want to create a new route, no issue, just go back here do a get route. Another get route we have, let's say we want to use params, so I'll just do a slash and that ID, and I'll do a public async get user by ID. Now we're getting in request, we're getting in response. Just do a return this dot user service dot get user by ID, and we'll be passing in request and response in there. So let's go ahead and define our method, and let's do a public async. Wow, I can't write async now. Get user by ID. Remember, it takes in two things: request and response. And we'll say return res.send. Now, just for the sake of testing it, I will be doing, for example, so we'll do a request.params route, save it, save this as well. If I go back, check the table, you will see it actually automatically created that stuff for you. Go back, type in a param. For example, if I type in test user, you can see this is going to be an object to be honest, since param is destructured. So let's try logging in it rather, since this is that logger is for logging stuff, not for logging such sort of things. Refresh, go back, and we have ID test user. I almost forgot that that thing need to be destructured. All right, so that does the stuff for this work as well. For upcoming videos, I really don't have anything much for you to show in this, because we have almost created every single thing that we needed to. However, I still want to show you a few of the things, like how to handle middlewares, how to handle, for example, middlewares that are going to be like injected into a route, and how to connect this thing to a database and start using it. So hope you want to watch those videos and want to stick around for them. So I will be releasing those videos soon. So stick around and have a nice day.